back 40. Listen, I don't need to be the one out there in the front talking all the time. We need to start hearing personal stories from people in rural America that are impacted by these bad policies that we've got in Washington, D.C. And Suzie was one of the people that immediately stepped up, and she's going to tell you about her personal story and said, these are the challenges that I'm facing in rural America. This is what these cuts are going to mean for me and my family. And it is a devastating story with hope. So I'm really glad she came all the way out here from Southwest Missouri. The other thing I want to tell you, and I got to mention this quickly because I'm so proud of her. There was this group down in Texas called Sanctuary Cities for the Unborn. And what they were doing is they were going around the country and they were trying to get little towns and cities to pass laws that made it possible for your neighbor next door to sue you if you received women's reproductive health care medication in the mail. Now I want you to imagine that. Let's say this old 57-year-old white farmer was your neighbor, and I just happened to hear you mention in passing at the grocery store or something that you'd received medication in the mail, or maybe your brother or your mother or somebody mentioned it. They wanted to give me the right to sue you because I disagreed with you religiously or ethically over your personal reproductive care choices. And you know what? Suzie and a group of other women down in this little town called Rolla, America said, this is bullshit. We're not going to let this happen. And they fought them head to head in 12 little towns around Southwest Missouri, and they beat them in every single town. Every single town. So if there's anybody that's got the right to come up here today and stand here and tell you her personal story, it's Suzie. So Suzie, get up here. Tell everybody.
Yeah.
No, you'll be all right. Nobody here bites.
Hi. I am a native Missourian. When I say that, my grandpa came to St. Louis with Daniel Boone in 1798. And my family has never left the state of Missouri. And then right after that, they moved to Montauk State Park, where my family surrounded that park. I grew up there, and my lifelong dream was to come back and be a farmer with my dad. Unfortunately, in the year 2000, I had a child, and the same year my dad died. I didn't want the farm that way, but that's the way I got it. Well, it turned out that I had a medically fragile child. The closest town with any services at all was 45 miles away. But thanks to some things they had done in Missouri, our governor at the time, Jay Nixon, there was a program where a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, would come to our house down by Montauk State Park and work with my son. It took him 4 years to learn how to walk. He had seizures, and the closest real hospital was St. Louis, which was 2 hours away. But they could stabilize him at a rural hospital called Salem Memorial. That hospital is on the closure list. We're going to lose it. With my medically fragile child, we finally decided to sell a farm that had been in my family for almost 200 years. There's two things here. That same farm went for sale last week for $1,800,000. One thing, there is not a farmer in America that can raise enough cattle to pay for that farm right there. People are buying up our farmland with no intention of farming them. It's bluffs, it's hill, it's river. You will not pay for that farm with cattle. And people down there are terrified because it's happening all around us. But back to my son. He is nonverbal. He is unable to use the toilet himself. He needs help eating. And also at this point, my mom is 90 years old and she has dementia. One more fall and she will be in nursing care. She can't pay for that. So it's up to Medicaid to pay for both of them. And then people say that she doesn't deserve a handout. This woman went to work in Licking, Missouri when she was 13 years old, full time. And she never quit work until the last factory pulled out of Dent County, Missouri. And she wouldn't have quit then if there would have still been a place to work. But now she needs us. But they're cutting the Medicaid to pay for that nursing care. They're cutting the Medicaid that will pay for my son's nurse, will pay for anything he needs. When we pass away, there is no other family to take care of him. And it really was a wake-up call this summer in June. My husband was at a university. Thanks to Donald Trump's policies, that university laid off about 30 people that had been there for 20 and 30 years. They lost their jobs. No warning at all. They lost NIH funding and NSF funding. I was in the middle of radiation for breast cancer. I had 3 days to find insurance or pay cash. And you haven't lived until you say, well, how much is the cash price for radiation? Nobody here can pay it. There's no way. So our choice was the ACA, COBRA, or Medicaid. Obviously, we didn't qualify for Medicaid. For us, COBRA was the best option. But without ACA, people like me and all these people losing their jobs at Amazon and at UPS, they have no insurance. Last week, I made a post about people telling me their stories about ACA. I had hundreds of people telling me that ACA saved their life. These people are working. They're not using the government. They're not wanting a handout. They just want to have insurance to cover them when they get sick. Some people went to the doctor for the first time in 30 years and found out they had cancer. And because of that, they are now alive because of ACA. The other thing, because of ACA, my son could not be kicked off of my husband's insurance policy. We need these things, and they have forgotten rural America. The 8th district is where I'm from with Jason Smith. You want to know the last time Jason has been back to Rolla, Missouri and to Salem, Missouri? We don't know. 8, 12 years, because he forgot where we live. Just like Josh Hawley and Eric Schmidt. They are taking away from people that have worked their entire lives. And they're worried about the SNAP. When our Walmart doesn't pay enough, you can work 2 jobs and be at Walmart and still can't afford groceries. You can't afford the doctor without ACA. Walmart doesn't offer insurance, and these people have nothing. There is nowhere else for them to go unless they're like me, lucky enough to leave. But I didn't want to, and rural Americans shouldn't have to move out of rural America to have health care. Because we're hardworking people, and they will do with less to stay there. But so far, Jason and everybody like him wants to take everything away, and they get on TV of a night and call us losers and suckers and users. And that is not what people in rural America are like. We have to fight for them because they need a voice. And without that broadband, they don't have a voice. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Woo.
Again, personal stories. All right. Last guy we're going to hear from today before I close it up. Y'all know in rural America, we love our stories. We're the land of Abe Lincoln. We're the land of Will Rogers. We're the land of Dolly Parton. And even though I hate to admit it because she likes this president, we're the land of Reba McEntire. But we're going to hear from our resident writer, good friend Robert, goes by Defiance13 on social media. He's going to come up and share a few words about rural America. Robert?
Yeah.
You all right, buddy?
Getting older than I used to be. Good morning, afternoon. My name is Robert. I'm from Helena, Arkansas. The dirt in Phillips County, Arkansas is not just soil. It is religion. It is the dark, stubborn, life-giving earth that has carried the weight of generations and fed people that barely remember the hands that are doing the feeding. And you can hold it in your palms and feel centuries of the Mississippi River floods settling into a single handful. It's rich and loamy, and it's black as memory and soft as forgiveness. It's strong enough to raise cotton and rice and children with equal resolve. And the world envies this dirt. Farmers from Brazil and Argentina and India and the Nile Delta itself dream of land that breathes like this. It is old, it is holy. It is carved out of river water and sunlight. And when you press your boots into it, it answers back like an old God saying, I am still here, so are you. And in Helena, the soil is not just land, it is our identity, it is our inheritance, and it is the quiet proof that something in this world was made to last. This is soil born from the slow miracles of time, from silk carried down miles of river and laid gently across the delta landscape like a family quilt. It is soil that is so deep you could go 500,000 miles away and still feel it pulling you home. It is the soil that raised high cotton and rice fields that shimmer like glass in the July sun, and beans that whisper when the evening wind comes off the great Mississippi River. Men have lived and died here. Women have bent over in the heat of the August sun, sweating prayers and blood into the rows, and children have played in it barefoot and laughing. Their heels are stained with the same earth that held their grandparents steady during the worst storms. This dirt remembers everything. It remembers you. It remembers your people. The ones who left, or the ones who stayed, and the ones that left but never stopped missing it. And it remembers the first plow that cut into it, and the last tear your grandfather wiped from his face the year the river rose too high. It remembers drought and abundance and heartbreak and harvest and the fury of the sun and the mercy of the rain, and still it stands rich and generous and unrivaled. And to speak of this soil is to speak of belonging. It is to speak of the quiet and unbroken truth that some places are not meant to be understood from a distance. They must be knelt in, they must be lived on, they must be loved. And when you stand on this ground, you do not simply stand in a field. You stand in the middle of a story that's older than your name. It's deeper than your grief. It's stronger than your fear. It is a story written in the finest ground God ever made. But even the richest soil on earth cannot protect the people who live on it from the cruelty of bad policy. Dirt this holy can raise a crop, but it cannot shield a community from the careless hands of leaders who have not knelt in it. They've never walked its rows. They've never felt the weight of a season on their backs. And that is the tragedy unfolding across rural America right now. It is not a failure of the land or labor, but a failure of government, a failure of boardrooms and hearing rooms and back rooms, free from the Delta's heartbeat. Out here, the soil still gives everything it has, but the policies coming out of this administration have taken more than they have ever returned. They have hollowed out our hospitals, the ones that saved our grandparents. They've destroyed our schools, the one that raised our children, and tightened the noose around the family farm, the one that built this region from nothing but mud and muscle and will. And you can stand in a Helena field at dusk and feel the land holding its breath, waiting, wondering, aching, because even the dirt knows that something sacred is being threatened, not by drought or flood, but by the very people sworn by oath to protect it. The policies of the last decade did not simply cut budgets, they cut people open. You can see it in a man who drives 40 miles to the nearest clinic because his hometown hospital closed, and now he plans his chest pains around whether he can afford the gas. You hear it in a teacher who keeps a drawer full of granola bars for kids whose parents have lost their jobs when tariffs sent prices so high that businesses closed. And she buys them with her own paycheck, the one that never seems to stretch far enough because the school board froze raises to offset another round of federal funding cuts. And you can sit at a kitchen table where a stack of medical bills is held down by a quart ball mason jar filled with bolts and screws from a tractor that must be held together with faith because parts cost more than the month's mortgage. You listen to the sound of a grown man makes whenever the bank calls about restructuring the family land, and he nods yes because he is too proud to say that he is drowning. And the fallout goes deeper still, because there are cashiers whose husbands' cancer treatments were interrupted when their insurance lapsed. And it doesn't matter because the local hospital no longer accepts their plan anyway, because reimbursement rates were gutted. And she still smiles for the customers because small towns teach you to do that. And every so often she'll step in the back room to cry when no one else sees her. It's her grandfather that drives a school bus because his disability check barely covers his prescriptions. He used to farm 200 acres before tariffs turned crop contracts into confetti, and now he keeps a Folgers can under his seat for loose change so he can buy lunch or a gallon of diesel. His doctor told him his heart will not last another year of this shit, and he knows that. But the bus route still needs someone who knows the back roads in the fog. And the waitress at the last diner in town, whose daughter was just accepted to Delta State University, but she had to drop out after the first semester because Pell Grant cuts stalled her financial aid, and now the girl works double shifts at the same diner, serving biscuits and coffee to farmers. She has to study nursing on her phone because the Wi-Fi is shit, because the company's expansion plan never got funded. There's a cattle auction where the pens stand half empty because half the ranchers are gone. Some have lost everything when feed prices spiked after another policy shuffle made fertilizer unaffordable. And weathered ranchers that just sold his last 20 head at a loss drove home in a truck with a transmission held together with baling wire. His wife will tell him that they'll make it work. She always does, but there is a shadow in her eyes today and a quiet fear that love can't always keep the lights on. And a widow who lives on the edge of town, her husband died of a stroke while waiting for an ambulance that had to come from another county because the EMS station closed after losing rural health funding. And she keeps his boots by the back door as if he might still come home, but he's not coming home. She says it's no one's fault, but it is. There are guidance counselors who now cover 2 and 3 schools stretched across 60 miles of fields and gravel roads. They meet with students in hallways because there is no office left for them. And often they're the first adult some child will ever tell about their bruises or their panic attacks or their fears. These teachers know every name. They know they are failing these children, but it's no fault of their own. There are school districts that think digital learning can replace a librarian, but it cannot. A librarian is not a luxury. They are a guide for a student looking for something that looks like them. There are art rooms with no paint. Kids that draw with broken crayons and faded markers are collected from restaurants. Special education departments reduced to one teacher and a paraprofessional who works 4 hours a day. And then that teacher drives 30 minutes after school to tutor students for free because they refuse to let these children become the collateral damage of this. Mothers who stand at school board meetings holding their children's Chromebooks like an offering, explaining that they have to do their homework in a McDonald's parking lot because it is the only place where they can get Wi-Fi. And that school board will nod with sympathy, and they will shrug with helplessness, and the room will go quiet because poverty has become normalized into silence. And the soybean farmer whose market disappeared after the export routes collapsed. He borrowed against the land to plant the crop, and then the buyer vanished, and the bank did not care. The bills don't care. So he sold his tractor at an auction to keep the lights on and food on the table, and then cried in his truck on the way home because he's out of tractors and he's out of ideas. And a young woman whose husband returned home to work the family farm, and now her hands shake outside of a funeral home as she tries to light a cigarette because he took his life after losing his grandfather's land. These are not isolated tragedies. They are the anatomy of the collapse. These stories are not metaphors. They are lived reality. But even now, after the Hospitals and the schools and the farms have been carved down to the bone, even after the storms and the shutdowns and the years of being told that we should wait our turn. There is something inside rural America that refuses to die quietly. It is something ancient and something holy, maybe, something carved into our spines. Because you cannot destroy a people who have buried family and still showed up the next morning to plant. You cannot destroy a people who have prayed over empty pantries and shelves and still packed lunches for other people's kids. You cannot destroy a people who have been overlooked and forgotten for so long that they've learned to take care of themselves. And that is the miracle of this place. That is the part the powerful will never understand about rural America. That is the part where the fire does not go out, and now that fire is rising, because somewhere between the closed hospitals and the rotting crops and the boarded up schools, we remember something. We remember that we are not just towns on a map. We are not just votes to be won. We are not the backup for someone's campaign ad. We are a people who carry this country on our backs. And if you want to see what a reckoning looks like, it'll start right here. It starts with a teacher who keeps showing up even when their paycheck doesn't cover their bills. It starts with nurses that hold hands when a stranger's family can't make it in time. It starts with mothers who work 2 jobs but still teach their children kindness. And it starts with old men that still show up to the coffee shop at dawn even though the coffee's terrible and the world feels heavier than it used to. It starts with us. So hear me now. We stand up for our lives. We stand up for the land. We stand up for our children who deserve more than the broken pieces of a broken nation. We stand up for every dream that we've buried because someone in power told us it was too expensive or it couldn't be done. We stand up because silence is what they count on, exhaustion is what they pray for, and hopelessness is the only victory they need. But we are not hopeless. We are not powerless, and we are not alone. We are the beating heart of the heartland. And when people like us, a people made of dust and grit and sorrow and stubborn grace, decided we have had enough, there is no force in Washington, D.C., or Wall Street or anywhere else on this godforsaken earth that can stop what comes next. So let this be the moment. And let it be the spark, and let it be when rural America threw off the weight that has been crushing it for generations, and we rise like a storm over Alabama. Let them hear us, let them reckon with us, and let them remember us forever. Thank you.
Damn, how do you follow that? Listen, in closing, I just want to say this. Rural America is a beautiful place. It's constituted by beautiful people. There's a portion of this harm that's being done to us that we have to be honest is inflicted by ourselves. Will Rogers was once asked, how do people in rural America learn? And he smiled and he said, some learn by reading, some are fortunate enough to learn by observation, and then he grinned and said, but the rest of them just have to pee on the electric fence for themselves. And there's a lot of peeing on the electric fence going on in rural America right now. The policies that they're passing that are closing clinics and hospitals around rural America and putting us in these deserts for health care, shame on them. But if we don't come together and set aside our political ideologies and our political differences to fight shoulder to shoulder to get the change we want and deserve, then shame on us. These policies that they're passing that are closing schools, that are causing kids to have to ride for 5 hours on school buses on dirt roads, that are being taught out of textbooks that are 10, 12, 15 years old, shame on them. But if we don't put aside the ideologies that cause us to allow books to be banned and teachers to be silenced and teachers to go unpaid, then shame on us. if they pass policies that destroy rural markets so that they can give billions of dollars of tax breaks to wealthy people in this country that will never struggle to pay the bills or to meet the demands or the challenges that Robert just talked about, then shame on them. But if we don't put aside our political differences and ideologies to stand up and say we still believe in a country that fights for the little guy, and that we shouldn't be fighting for crumbs under the table while they eat steak up above, then shame on us. And if you don't think it can be done, I want to remind you in closing of one simple thing. The largest political movement in the history of the United States of America was grown and planted and raised in rural America. It was the largest progressive movement in the history of this country. It was called the Grange Movement. It's the first political party in this country that asked women and people of color to serve in leadership roles, to get better policy for farmers and people that live out where I live. It was the first political organization to storm the streets of Kansas and Texas and Missouri and Indiana. And the same people today that want to put the litmus test in place that you have to be a conservative or a Republican to be a good member of rural America, shame on you, because your great-great-grandparents were some of the most progressive people on this planet, and they marched in the cities and towns of rural America in the late 1800s and early 1900s to fight for everything you take for granted today. So now is the time to come together. Now is the time to put together our differences and to fight for the things that we believe in, because nobody else is going to fight for us. So thank all of you for being here today. Thank you for listening to these stories. And those of you that aren't from rural America, I can't tell you how much the rest of us who do appreciate you standing shoulder to shoulder with us, even though we so many times vote against our best interest. You're still standing there with us and giving us that little bit of grace we need to do the right thing. And it is appreciated more than you will ever know. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.